Hi there. Welcome back. One indicator that this episode is one of my highest values is that while I was preparing for what I'm about to share today, I tried so hard to keep it as short as possible. And my promise to myself was that every time I would create a podcast episode, I would only limit my script outline to one page or maximum 2 pages. And then, as I was working on the outline for today's episode, I ended up creating a 4 page script outline. I just can't make it any shorter. There's just so many things that I want to share in this episode. So I'm not sure if I will end up cutting this into 2 parts. I don't know. But I'll just share as much as I can based on my personal journey, my observations, and how being able to decode body language and read people have helped me tremendously in my leadership journey and in my journey as a business owner. And to be honest, in general, like even my relationship with friends, with colleagues, with acquaintances. So I hope that by the end of this episode, you would have some golden nuggets that you can take with you. Let me start by asking you a question of how often have you been in a situation where you hoped you can read the mind of the person sitting across you? Maybe that's your boss whom you've asked for a promotion and you don't exactly know if they'll be saying yes or no. Or maybe a colleague that you may have offended during a meeting, or a friend you haven't connected with for a very long time. Or what about someone you're dating for the very first time? And you're anxiously wondering if they're having a great time with you or not. I'm sure that there's so many instances in our lives where we just hope that there is a way for us to read other people's minds. Because personally, for me, I have been in numerous situations where I just hope that there is a way for me to know exactly what the other person is thinking. That way, maybe the situation or the conversation would be less awkward or less tense, or I would know exactly what to do. Unfortunately, there's no way for us to read minds, but there is a way for us to have a really good understanding of what the other person could probably be thinking, and that's by decoding their body language. Our ancestors, thousands of years ago, they used to communicate to each other through body language, through nonverbal cues and facial expressions. That's when there was no language yet. They were just making sounds and they were just making gestures to communicate to each other. And yet, in spite of the absence of language, they were able to build communities. They were able to create families, reproduce, build relationships, thrive and survive, and even rule the world, create rituals and traditions. So, they created all these by just communicating with each other through nonverbal cues. And so it comes very natural to human beings to communicate through our body language. In fact, it's really part of our human nature, part of our instinct or intuition to also be able to decode that. The problem, though, is that with all the distractions that's going on around us today and over time, we become less and less aware of our surroundings. So, thousands of years ago, the only thing that they do is to hunt, basically. And so, most of our attention is when they're talking to someone, they're just looking at each other in the eye. I mean, I could imagine that's what they're doing, and like really paying attention to what the other person is trying to say. Today, if you're having a conversation with someone, even if you're having dinner and there's just the two of you in a fancy restaurant, there's so many distractions around you that could be taking away your attention from the person you're having dinner with. It could be your phone, your social media notifications. Someone liked your post and you're like, ooh, I received so many likes in this post. Or maybe you received a call from someone, or you saw a couple sitting across a corner and you feel like they're quarreling or arguing about something. So we all get distracted. And those distractions are what disables us from tapping into that human nature, that intuition that we have that helps us decode body language. I'm sure you've already used the line, my gut says something's off. whenever you're having conversation with someone, or you're in a situation, or you're about to make a deal with a person, and just feel like something's off. There's no logical reason as to why it feels off, but you just know that it's off. That, my friend, is intuition. And our intuition is actually our subconscious mind telling us something is wrong. And it's not just based on literally gut feel, like just based off of nowhere. Our intuition is based on the patterns that we've recognized from past experiences. It's just that we're not conscious about it. And so those things the patterns that we've recognized are all stored in our subconscious mind. And so that's why we can't really explain exactly why it's off, but we know it is. It's because our subconscious mind is the one working. It's the one telling us that based on the patterns we've observed in the past, this could be wrong. The thing though is, because of all the distractions that's happening around us, sometimes we don't trust our gut feel, our intuition. And rightly so, because for example, if we're having dinner with someone and our attention is not 100% towards the person because we get distracted with our phone, with everything that's going on around us, I don't think that we have the clarity to assess what's really going on in the situation, to correlate it to the patterns that we observed in the past. There would be tendencies of bias. Like maybe because we weren't paying close attention, we thought that the other person is actually not as invested in the conversation, where in fact, maybe it was us who weren't invested because we kept on checking our phone, or we kept on looking at other people dining in that restaurant. Not only that, there's also so many things, so many distractions around us. Like not only social media, I keep on mentioning social media, but also even, for example, societal expectations. Like if you are a manager, you should behave this way. If you're a business owner, you should act this way. If you're an influencer, you should be this way. So there's a specific expectations from people of how you should be and how you should act based solely on who you are, your job, your income, or your lifestyle. Another form of distraction as well is manipulation. Some people who are actually very aware of the power of nonverbal cues of humans' body language and wants to be able to control the situation tend to manipulate. They tend to make you feel that this is what they think about the situation or the relationship when it's actually not. It's very common in the dating world nowadays, based on everything that I'm seeing on social media. It's like most men would make you feel that they like you even if they don't. But manipulation is actually a very interesting topic that we can also discuss for another day. But also another form of distraction, which maybe a lot of us are not that aware, is self-obsession. This one for me is the biggest distraction of them all. Self-obsession does not mean that we're all narcissists. Like we all think that we're great and amazing and we're this really beautiful and amazing creatures or human beings. No, self-obsession in a sense that we think so much of what other people would say about us. So imagine having a dinner with someone and all you can think about is what the other person thinks of you, whether they like your dress, do they like your makeup, the way that you opened the menu, was it right? Or the way that you laughed, was it a turn off for them? So we were all so obsessed with what other people are thinking of us that we lose focus on trying to connect with the person in front of us. This is actually a cognitive bias, this kind of self-obsession. It's called spotlight effect. And it is when we overestimate the attention that we get from other people. We think that if we made a mistake, that other people would notice it, but not only notice it, they would remember it and they would keep on repeating it in their heads as often as we do when we make a mistake. So if, for example, you mispronounce the word, how often have you replayed it in your mind, thinking that other people might have done the same, that maybe all throughout their day, they have been thinking about that one time that you have mispronounced the word, where in fact, a lot of people, each one of us, are so caught up with our own lives. We all have to deal with so many different things that I don't think any one of us would have so much capability or capacity to think or to dwell on the mistakes of others. And so, if there's going to be one big distraction that we all can try to lessen that is within our control, that's this cognitive bias. That's self obsession. That's trying to take away that spotlight effect from our head. Stop thinking that people are just there noticing your every single move. So, in this episode, we will cover two very important points. First is how you can hone your intuition. I mentioned earlier that intuition is actually part of our human nature. It comes naturally to us. But the reason why we need to hone it now is because we became less and less aware and we became less and less intuitive. And so just like any other skill, we need to be able to hone it so that we can use it more objectively. The second is I'll also be sharing with you ways that I use in order to decode people. This helped me a lot in my leadership journey, in dealing with clients, dealing with team members, even dealing with my staff as a business owner, with friends, with my husband even. It's just so beautiful when you're able to pay close attention to nonverbal cues because it could help you prevent or act upon something that you may have thought wasn't an issue but actually is, based off on the microexpressions and how the other person is acting. So we all know that as human beings, the way we communicate comes in three parts. There's the tone of voice, there's words or vocal, and then there's nonverbal cues or body language. Out of all those three, thousands of years ago, our ancestors paid close attention to nonverbal cues. But today, we pay close attention just to the tone of voice and the vocal, the words, the choice of words of the people the person we're talking to. Unfortunately, nonverbal cues comprises 55% of the way that we communicate. And no matter how much we try, you personally, maybe you're saying, I try to be as honest as possible about what I feel. Unfortunately, not everyone around you feels the same way. And they're not honest because they just don't want to express themselves. There's so many reasons why people don't say exactly what they want to say, or maybe feeling of insecurity. For example, if you're in a meeting, maybe that person doesn't feel safe sharing and speaking up and sharing exactly what they're feeling. It could also be caused by avoidance. They don't want to hurt anyone or offend anyone, so they don't speak up. And so because of all of these complexities in communication, we need to not just trust what the other person is saying. Just because we try to be honest and open about what we feel and what we think doesn't mean that all the other person in the world is also feeling the same way. And I'm sure there are a few instances in your life when you yourself didn't exactly communicate what you had in mind. And I'm sure that if in that situation there was someone looking at you and paying close attention to your nonverbal cues, that they would have known that you're not sharing everything. There's so many negative and positive signals that you can use in decoding body language. I would say it's so much better if you look it up on Google, to be honest. Just some of the very common negative and positive signals that we can observe in people is, for example, clenching of jaw. Clenching of jaw obviously means that they're angry or frustrated about something or annoyed. There's also the crossing of arms. That's one indication as well that the other person is protecting themselves or trying to guard themselves. So maybe they're feeling uncomfortable in the situation, or they're not opening up. They don't feel like they have connected well with you or the people around them. Some examples of positive signals would be head tilting. When a person does that, we don't usually are able to control it. Like if we're talking to someone and we're genuinely interested in what they're saying, Try to notice what you're doing yourself, and you would find in some situations where you would tilt your head because you want to learn more, you want to hear more of what the other person is saying. Another example of positive signal is mirroring. I mean, that's very popular in the dating world. Like, if someone is mirroring your actions, that means they like you. But mirroring is actually not just exclusive in the dating world. Even in the workplace setting or in a platonic situation, if you see any person who is mirroring you, that means they like you, that means they have connected with you. All right, so now let's talk about how you can hone your intuition. First off is focus on the small things. The way to read nonverbal cues is to not focus on the voice or the words or what the other person is saying. For me personally, if I'm trying to really get to know a person at a deeper level, I ask them questions, but I feel like I become deaf after asking the question. I just don't pay attention to, or not as much attention to what they're saying. Instead, I observe closely to their body language. I observe their nonverbal cues. Because there's so many things that you can pick up. Number one is whether they're comfortable about that question. Number two is whether they're very comfortable and excited about the question. If they are, that would tell you that it's one of their highest values. And if you ask questions related to that, that means they are excited about it. They're happy to share more about it. Focusing on the small things means that you're focusing on their microexpressions. Honing your intuition means that you need to spend so much time practicing it. It doesn't happen overnight. I remember the first time that I've learned about human body language and human nature and nonverbal cues, and I got so invested in learning it more. I found it so hard to look someone in the eye, have a conversation with them, and at the same time, through my peripheral vision, pay close attention to, let's say, what their hands are doing or where their feet is pointing. So that could be really tricky, but being able to do that could help with your intuition. And so it's very important that you practice it. Practice every day. Practice talking to different people and being conscious and aware of their nonverbal cues. Eventually, it would come naturally, but in the first few instances, it would be very challenging to balance both, like being able to be present in the conversation so that you can respond to them if they ask a question, but also being aware of all their gestures. Another thing that you have to understand is when you're honing your intuition or when you're observing people, make sure that you don't do all the talking. You can never observe someone, or you can't have the time to observe their nonverbal cues if you're the one who talks a lot. So maybe you would ask a question. While they're answering, you have some window where you can observe their nonverbal cues. Another way you can hone your intuition is have a conversation with your friends and family. Start with them. And I'm sure even now, if you try to think of the mannerisms that you've observed with friends and family, what do they usually do when they're upset? What do they do when they're excited? What do they do when they're frustrated? I'm sure that in the past, you've already recognized that. You're just not aware that those were actually nonverbal cues that they're communicating. So try to have as much conversations with your family, take some notes, and observe how they interact with you when you're having dinner or when you're watching television or with your friends. Be observant and take notes and review those notes. See if any of those things that you've noted are actually nonverbal cues that mean something. I would say that the best way to hone your intuition is when you can share this learning process with someone. I remember years ago when I started to be very invested in trying to read people. My husband is the one I shared all of these things that I'm learning with. And so the learning became even more interesting because there were times when we would sit down in a cafe and we would just observe people passing by, people ordering, people sitting down and having conversations with friends. And we would try to guess. Are they arguing? Is it their first time dating? Are they Can we sense some awkwardness in this meetup? Things like that. And we enjoyed it. It became even more fun. So if you have some friends or family members around you who are also interested to hone their intuition, try to do it with them. Okay, so now we're down to the juiciest part of this episode. These are the 5 ways that I personally use to decode people. The first one is what I call the environment. If you want to know if a person is telling the truth or you can trust someone, pay close attention to the people around you when they're talking. So, for example, if you're in a group and then one person started to share about a business idea or what they've done at work, what they have accomplished, instead of focusing your attention to that person talking, look around you. Look at the actions and nonverbal cues of those people listening, especially those you know have worked with them or have had a longer relationship with them. And see if through their actions and gestures, see if they're being supportive of what the other person is saying or agreeing to it, or if they're frustrated or anything of that sort. I remember this happened 2 years ago when the place that I work in acquired a business, and then we were having a meeting with the new owner and the previous owner of that business together with the manager who was hired by the previous owner. And then we were just chatting about process and systems and everything. And then the manager started to share about all the things that she has implemented in the business. And at first I thought, this sounds like this person is just overselling themselves. And I want to know if they're really telling the truth or not. So instead of paying close attention to what the other person was saying, I looked around me. I tried to observe the previous owners and see what their reactions are with every single thing that the manager was saying. And then I saw the previous owner clenching her jaw. And I said, that doesn't look good. I think, and you wouldn't know right away what's wrong, but you just know that there is something off. And in my head, I knew that it's either this person, this manager is lying, or the previous owner feels like the manager exposing too much information or sharing too much information before the deal is done. And so after that meeting, we had dinner with the previous owner and we had a chat and it went really well. And then she started sharing her frustration about the manager and how she talks about the business as if she was there for a very long time, as if she was there resolving a lot of problems, where in fact she was only there for a few weeks. And that's when I knew, that's why she clenched her jaw. And that was an indication that the manager was lying. So when someone is talking, don't just pay attention to them. Pay close attention to the people that surrounds them. See if they're agreeing with everything that they say. On the flip side, you would know if the person is telling the truth if you could see that the other people are nodding, are being very supportive, are staring at them and sometimes even gazing them, and you can see the admiration in their eyes. That's when you know that the person talking is telling the truth. But if they're not, that means something else. Another technique I use is what I call the silent gap. So if you want to extract truth from someone, ask them a difficult question related to that topic, have them answer it, and then be silent after they answer. Be silent, sit still for a few seconds, and just look at them in the eye. It works really well. For example, if you ask someone if they were being truthful with you when, let's say, with what they did over the weekend, and then they would start to answer. And then you just let them answer. And after answering, you just look at them in the eye and sit there, no response, no whatsoever, and just wait for a few seconds. That silence would kill anyone who's lying. Because at the back of their mind, especially if they're lying, they would be very conscious and anxious. They would think, what is this person thinking? Did she figure me out? Did she does she know that I'm lying? Or is this person preparing for a rebuttal? Things like that. It would make them feel so uneasy. And then sometimes they would either stutter and just go on tangent and talk about something else, or they would become defensive, or sometimes they would just spill the truth. That silence, even if it's just for a few seconds, it would kill them. It's so hard when you're lying and the other person is just looking at you and it's silent because you don't know if they've already figured it out. Another strategy I do is I focus on the whisper. So, a lot of people in a conversation, for example, they say subtle remarks or jokes or sarcasms and then change the topic to what they want to say. So, for example, I remember years ago, I was having a conversation with a team member, and then I told him that even if there's age gap, I still feel like this you is older, and a younger colleague have equal value that they can contribute to the company. This person responded first with a joke, like, I'm way older, I don't think that we have the same level. And then, but not kidding, actually, I agree with you. I feel like we're both valuable contributor. I feel like we've both had very interesting experiences in the past that we can contribute to the team, stuff like that. He thought that changing the topic and saying that it was just a joke would make me forget that subtle remark, that very subtle joke that he said. But it's the opposite. Whatever is the subtle remark or joke or line or statement that the person said, and then they change it. They say it was just a joke or it was just sarcasm or something like that. They were just trying to be funny, and then say something that, let's say, that's in agreement with what you said. Most of the time, it's the subtle remarks, the sarcasms, the jokes that's actually the truth. And a lot of people use that. Even in meetings and conversations with friends, a lot of people use jokes or sarcasms as a way to say exactly what they want to say, but then take it back. Another thing I always remember is what I call as the big sigh. So if I feel like someone is feeling frustrated or disappointed or heartbroken, but they're not very open and direct about it, I ask them the question, a difficult question that's related to what I feel might have hurt them. And then I pay close attention to how they respond after that statement or question. And usually, if someone is carrying something heavy, they would take a deep breath and then sigh before they proceed to answering your question. So if they're hiding what they truly feel, they might take a deep breath, sigh, do that, and then say that it's okay, I'm actually fine, nothing to worry. Don't believe that. That means they're carrying so much. It's so heavy, but they're just not opening up. In leadership, this comes in really handy because most of the time you have to deal with team members who are not comfortable opening up, who are not comfortable sharing exactly what they have in mind. But if you notice it, you need to not force them right away to share what it is really that's bothering them, but at least to keep that in mind and continue trying to gain their trust and continue making them feel safe until they're able to open up. It's very important, though, that we all remind ourselves that when it comes to decoding body language and reading people, context is important. I don't want you to go away from this episode and think that based on those examples and those positive signals and negative signals, that anytime a person does that's already what it meant. No, context is very important in reading people. And that is why it takes practice, because it's not just a very straightforward formula of 1 + 1 = 2. Sometimes it's very complicated. you have to understand the environment, the people they're dealing with, the backstory, all these complexities. At the end of the day, you're dealing with people, and us human beings, we're very complex in nature. And so be very wary and make sure that you're not judging the situation or the person right away just based off on a list of signals. And this is why before we can be very intuitive, we have to hone it, we have to practice it. Remember that intuition is being able to have a deeper and wider understanding of the situation, most of the time without conscious reasoning. But it is so powerful. It helps you prevent conflicts or resolve conflicts that maybe you wouldn't know was there in the first place if you didn't pay close attention. That's it for today. I hope that I was able to share something informative. Make sure to hone your intuition. If there's any skill that you can acquire or master this 2025, I hope that being more intuitive is one of them. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.